Hi friends, I hope you are all staying safe and warm this weekend. Our text for today comes from John chapter 2, beginning in verse 11. This, the first of his miraculous signs Jesus performed at Cana in Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples. There they stayed for a few days. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found men selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove them all from the temple area, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here! How dare you turn my Father's house into a market?" His disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." Then the Jews demanded of him, "What miraculous sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all of this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." The Jews replied, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you are going to raise it in 3 days?" But the temple he had spoken of was his body. After he had raised from the dead, his disciples recalled what he had said. Then they believed the scripture and the words that Jesus had spoken. Now, while he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many people saw the miraculous signs he was doing and believed in his name. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all men. He did not need men's testimony about man, for he knew what was in each man's heart. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
So we start out our text in the northern region of Galilee. Shortly after Jesus has called his first disciples, he attends a wedding, where at the request of his mother, he demonstrates extravagant generosity, bringing joy to a wedding party. In doing this, he performs his first miracle, or sign, as John calls it. After some time, the Passover festival arrives, and Jesus travels with his disciples back south to Jerusalem to celebrate the holiday in proximity to the temple. Now, this is the place where heaven and earth meet, where God's presence is most felt on earth. A place where people go to pray, to worship, to encounter the divine. Now, the temple at this time was divided into courts. As you went deeper into the temple, into the inner courts, you would enter increasingly sacred spaces, and each of these had increasing requirements for entry. Any visitor who was not a Jew, those who were called Gentiles, who wanted to come and worship God at the temple, could only go in to the outermost of these courts, the court that they called the court of the Gentiles. It is in this court that the drama of this story unfolds. Jesus walks in and he finds that the one place in the temple where Gentiles are welcome to participate in worship and prayer has become a noisy and messy place. A market has taken over the area with money exchange tables and sacrificial animals for sale. This sacred place, where people of any nation can come, commune with God, has become busy and crowded. A place where people buy and sell goods, including sheep and cattle, doing all of the things that sheep and cattle do. We see a different side of Jesus here than we did at the wedding in Cana. Jesus fashions a whip for himself out of cords and drives out merchants and the animals that they are selling, making all of the noise and disruption that comes with driving out cattle and sheep. He turns over tables, sending coins of money changers scattering across the floor. And above the noise of startled animals and people and tables crashing to the ground, his disciples hear his voice. "How dare you turn my Father's house into a market?" Jesus walks into a sacred place. He sees money-making ventures getting in the way of divine encounter, the thing that is meant to happen in these temple courts. He sees Gentiles being robbed of a peaceful place to worship and pray. And he reacts loudly and violently. He disrupts the norms of the temple and those who lead there, who have allowed this market to arise, marking the beginning of what will become a turbulent relationship that Jesus will have with Jewish leaders throughout this book. It's a startling scene, even to read about. It's even more startling if you ever see it depicted in art. We're used to see a Jesus whose face shows calm serenity, who has a halo of light around him to mark his status as the light of the world. We think of that light bringing hope, healing, reassurance. But here we see that light can also bring disruption. Light can come in the soft, gentle glow of the moon, or in the flash of a lightning bolt. And here, the light of the world is startling and works to disrupt the status quo. Here we see a Jesus who unabashedly challenges any power that perpetuates injustice. He sees people prioritizing profit over the sanctity of the temple and the worship that is meant to happen there. And so he disrupts their profit to make space for something far more important, a place where all nations can come and worship God. The response of the Jewish people here is fascinating to me. They don't drive Jesus out of the temple. They ask a question. They ask Jesus to show his credentials, to give some sort of a sign that he has the authority to charge into the temple and take charge of what happens there instead of leaving its running to the priests. Jesus responds in a way that won't be understood for a few more years, until he has died and been raised. Destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days. The crowd gathered around then did not understand. I doubt any of us would. He's standing in the middle of a literal temple, answering a question about his authority to take charge in that temple. And so naturally, his hearers assumed he was speaking about the walls and doors and pillars around them. He would give them a sign for his authority, the one that he had just predicted, but not for a few more years. It would only be after the sign of the resurrection came that his disciples would understand that he was speaking of his own body, the greatest example the world would ever see of heaven meeting earth. The best opportunity to encounter God was no longer within the temple courts, but standing in front of them. This greatest sign would not come for a while yet. But until then, Jesus continued to teach and to perform signs like he did in Cana. And people continued to follow after him and encounter the divine among them, whether they understood that or not. In John chapter 2, we see that Jesus cannot be summarized in a single story. He is the man who listens to his mother's request and performs a miracle to honor a family and increase joy at a wedding celebration. He's also the man who brandished a whip to disrupt the misuse of God's house and to make sure that there was space for all people there. May God grant us wisdom to know when to bring a hand of peace and joy and when to bring disruption to injustice. May we clear our lives of every venture and distraction that stands in the way of our encounter with God. And may we never be the ones who stand in the way of others. May the Lord bless you and keep you safe until we're able to meet in person again.